Hi to everyone. This has been a really busy time. Right now we have Alan's son here visiting us from Germany. He's just gone to a shop for a few minutes, so I have a chance to go do this. He's not Catholic, and I felt like I might be imposing to do this while he's actually here in the house. And he's been here now for over a week, so I've been neglecting all of you because he's here. He's here, so forgive me. Now that I have my little cheat sheets here, okay. First of all, I do have all of our St. Peregrine medals, and for any of you who don't have any of those yet, or your Consoling Heart medals, be sure you let me know. I'll run a little email out to everyone just to verify that, so you can answer me. As St. Peregrine is our patron saint, for us to help console those who are in need of consoling. It actually would not surprise me if we see the time come when we get a female patron saint to help us. That would happen in a matter of providence. I don't think we need to choose someone to do that. We didn't choose St. Peregrine. He turned up for us, and it'll do the same if we need another patron saint and God chooses for that. It'll happen the same way. He will send it also. The way that we'll know is if we get a first-class relic, because St. Peregrine is a first-class relic, and somehow what will happen is we're going to get a first-class relic of one of the female saints. It'll just be at someone's house, so it'll just turn up for us. That's what we call providence. According to St. Theresa of Avila, I've been reading quite a bit more on her, and according to her, she said that she talked about prayer of recollection. And she said that as we bring our will in union with God's will, the Lord will grant us many, many graces to replace other graces that we give up. Now, that's kind of a review. This is sort of bringing everything together that we spoke about last time. So you don't have to worry when it's time to move on from one grace or one type of graces that the Father is giving you to another type. Because God does that on His own. When you start receiving new types of graces, you'll understand it right away, because the other ones that you are accustomed to will rather fade off. When I say fade off, I do not mean that you won't have any of them anymore. I mean that they won't happen so frequently. You still won't forget them. That's an interesting thing about that. But when you get a signal grace of any type, you never forget it, because it's so impacting on yourself. So you don't have to worry about ever forgetting what God has left on you, because you couldn't forget it if you wanted to. Theresa gave us an explanation on this prayer of recollection. Her words in this, she said, in the prayer of recollection, it's a kind of a dilation or an enlargement of the soul. And when you have that happen, when you have this dilation and enlargement of the soul, it enlarges the capacity for your love. And to enlarge that capacity is actually a matter of, I'm having trouble with my cheat sheet. Maybe I should have even had it. When that happens, then it's actually necessary for the soul to have that enlargement, so it's able to gradually retain all these new things that the Father is granting to us. It's an interior dilation, and it's given to us so that the soul is less constrained to his service. Less constrained meaning less inhibited, or more capable of. And it's more capable then, at that time, as you experience this greater possibility to love, this endurance for this wonderful love that you find yourself able to do. When that happens, it's a necessary thing then, because you never were able to do it like that before you were learning this prayer of recollection. Prayer of recollection is the very first type of prayer. Theresa called it the result of meditation and just vocal prayer. It also brings us into mental prayer. Let me be sure that I'm saying what I want to say about that mental. Ah, yes. And as Theresa uses this phrase to enlarge or make or dilate our souls so that we have a greater capacity for love, we kind of use that same phrase. Only we use a different word, but our semantics are the same. Because this is what we say. We say we want to broaden ourselves. So we learn from one another. We take upon from one another. And it broadens us. Well, it's the very same thing. That's what Theresa was saying to these nuns, but she was using this different word. Part of when you have mental prayer, you'll notice in your little books that mental prayer is the very, very first thing that you do in the morning. I've known other priests or religious who have done it not first thing in the morning, but I was always told to do it first thing in the morning, so I don't really know any other way to do that. My favorite spiritual director said, do it before your feet hit the floor. And it's a matter of having a perfect moment. The perfect moment is when you are with God. So you put yourself into that place, into that dimension with God. You don't have to say anything, but you can, because there's no real stipulation on that. But as you do, and you're with God, then quiet happens. And as that quiet happens, it's God's turn to speak with you. So you learn many, many secrets from the Father in mental prayer. I think I learn all of my secrets from mental prayer, but I may be wrong about that, but my awareness of God sharing with me comes through mental prayer. And awareness is really the key. So if it happens at other times also, my awareness isn't really there. Okay, sorry. This interior dilation, oops, sorry, I already said that. When things happen to you, like, and we've spoken of this is kind of a review also. When we have signal graces, when you have a signal grace, it doesn't matter how long ago it happened, you don't really forget it. There's a certainty. It's unexplainable. Something happens, you cannot ever deny that happened. You cannot deny it to yourself, let alone to someone else, that happened to you. That particular signal grace that occurred, you can never Never just pretend that did not happen. It's a certainty. Theresa of Avila says, God imprints upon the soul this certainty. If we do not have this certainty, and we think something has happened to us, and we've had some kind of an experience, it has not been a true experience in union with God. It's not been total union with God. Total union with God meaning immersing your entire soul with God Himself. She says what happens is you have kind of like a partial faculty that becomes involved with God. An example of that is like when I read books that that Theresa of Avila has written, and I just love them, but I don't experience them. So it is a partial use of my faculties. It's not a total immersion of my own soul in union with God. It's a partial thing, because I'm only using one faculty. When you have total immersion of your faculties with God, something different happens. And you not only are aware of something, of an experience, or you read or whatever, but you actually live it. You move it, you breathe it. It's a total immersion in whatever that thing is that's happened to you. That is a certainty that you cannot deny. It almost puts you into a position of being startled. It almost does that. And in that being startled, that never goes away. There's always that amazement. And it's the Father that does that. It comes part and parcel with this whole thing of signal graces. There are times when God enters the soul briefly. This is still words from Theresa. This happens in an actual grace. Now, an actual grace is what we're calling signal graces. Okay, that's an actual grace. It becomes supernatural then by using a common signal grace, and the Father makes this supernatural. Now, when that happens, this entering of the soul that the Father does, it's generally very brief. It does not happen for a long period of time. That's another part that makes it so startling, because it doesn't happen for a really long time. And then suddenly it's gone away. The experience has gone away. But it has imprinted itself upon you. It is a truth. Theresa calls it a truth. And that truth remains indefinitely, because it is an imprint. She says that it remains on the soul even if that particular grace has never been given to you ever again. It doesn't matter. It's never again, but it's imprinted upon you. Truth evolves. So there's a strange thing about this. Something happens and you don't know you don't have an understanding of what has really happened. You just know something has happened. And so you have no understanding of it. It's not really clear. There's no vision of it. So the nuns would ask Theresa, well, if you can't understand it and you can't see it, then how does it mean anything? And Theresa's response to that was, as your life goes on, in retrospect, it has great meaning. And that great meaning comes from the fact of the uncertainty that remains in it. Most of us, if something happens to us that's very, very lovely in the church, and it's a beautiful thing, maybe I don't know, maybe they had some kind of a devotion that was done, very moving. But you leave and you think, oh, that was so really nice. But in 10 years, you may forget that. It's never going to happen when you have a signal grace. Never happens like that. Because it comes embedded in this certainty that only God can give you. Hang on. I want to talk about now how Theresa weaves in and out about prayer. That was her skill. That was what she's noted for, is her concept of prayer. As she watched the nuns, she was able to see there were so many different kinds of prayer, and they all utilized it very differently. And it was her greatest skill, was her knowledge of prayer. So we're going to talk a little bit how that weaves in and out now to how we live out our prayer. And the prayer that Theresa's talking about, this recollection prayer, that also flows into your mental prayer, that kind of prayer brings us to moments of serenity within us. This is your perfect moments. Now it's bringing us to our mental prayer. Theresa says, this is God, when God speaks with you. So even though I certainly have used vocal prayer in those moments of mental prayer, probably it's best to leave a couple of minutes or a few seconds at least for God to say to you what He needs to have said. It's like she opens a new door. And this new door introduces us to what we're calling consecration to Mary. Now, you have to realize, when Theresa of Avila was around, there was no such thing as consecration to Mary. There were people who certainly had great devotion to the Blessed Mother, but there was no such thing yet. There was no Maximilian Kolbe, and there was no St. Louis de Montfort. So there was no teaching or theology on this concept of devoting ourselves and consecrating ourselves totally to Mary. But how she talks about broadening ourselves and this perfect moment that brings us into mental prayer, it opens the door to that. Reflect on the phrase Mother Church. Now that's a very old phrase. That comes like year 200, year 300. They used Mother Church. It came from when Jesus said to Mary, Mother, this is your son. Son, this is your mother. And it was always understood that John stood or was the symbol of the people who were the church, and Mary was the mother of that. So then, Mother Church, when we use that term, I would like you to reflect on that. And what does that mean to you when you say, or when we say, I hope you say, Mother Church. The rest of us certainly do, but you have to consider that concept here in your own mind, not to John. What does that mean to you? Mother Church. Now consider to come to God through Mary, and faith is a matter of making visible what is invisible. Faith is always that. So we come to God through Mary, and suddenly when we do that, we discover that this invisible concept of faith comes alive. And it comes alive because this Mary, our mother, is a living person. We know her as a living person. She certainly was alive. She was a living person. That's why she could be the mother of Jesus. So now transport the name of, or transfer it, translate it, however you want to call that, the name of Mother Mary into our vision of the church. So if instead of seeing the church as we know it, consider this beautiful young woman. I guess she wasn't young forever, but we're going to see her as young at the moment. This Mother Mary, who takes a mantle, embraces us all, holds us in. Now she is Mother Church. Now we are consecrated to her. We are consecrated then to the church. The church is her. So look who we have become. Not only did we consecrate ourselves to her, we consecrated ourselves to the church. Now, in trying to stay close to that church, or within the church, we find him. So of course, she brings us to him. When you study consecration, it says how Mary always brings you to Jesus. Well, that's why she does. Because we don't go just to Mary. We go through Mary. Now, what does that mean? Now I'm seeing a whole different picture. I'm seeing we're going through Mary, meaning we're going through the church. And we find him. There he is. Not only do we find him, we become him. We become as he was. We become as she was. We have to do that. To come through the church, to be the church, is being her. That's what it's being. In doing that and coming through the church then, we find that the Trinity that she is one in union with, and she's one in union with all three aspects of the Trinity, we find that we are now one with this Mary, who is one in the Trinity, that is one in the church. It is really all one thing. She's a living being. Now the church is a living being. It's not a thing. It's alive. So to say then that the church is us, and to say, well, it's us, and that's why we know the church is a living thing or a living whatever, isn't really substantial. Because it's a living, because it's given to us through her. Before I close, I have to go make dinner right away, so I can't dawdle. But I wanted to tell you a little story about our daughter, our daughter that was killed in a car accident many years ago. Many things happened before she died, and I've heard people say this before. I don't think this was unusual at all, but before a person comes upon these last days, there's certain things that the Father shares with them. There's little revelations that are very profound, and our little Sarah was not an exception to that. And one of the things, there's been a few things that I've just like that certainty on my mind has imprinted me. This was probably the most profound thing that Sarah said. And she said to me, you know, Mom, it's not what you do that condemns you. It's what you think about it. Now that's not a quote. I don't remember the exact words. But that's how I heard it. I heard her saying it like that. Now let me say that again. Because I didn't understand her. I couldn't understand what she was saying to me. She said, "You know, Mom, it isn't what you do that condemns us. It's what you think about it." Well, I thought that was crazy, because it is what you do that condemns you. And then Sarah died 2 weeks later. We never really had a chance to talk that one through. It took me probably a couple of years. And I suddenly understood what that little girl understood. And what she was saying to me is, "You know, Mom, it isn't what we do, because we can be forgiven for those things, but what we think about it. Because if we think it's okay, we'll do it again. If we think it's okay, we won't go to confession." After I understood what she was saying, or what she was saying made some kind of sense, it was such a blessing, of one of those beautiful things that she was able to leave to us. I think of it often, and it was a gift to me particularly. She left that to me. God gave that to her to give to me. So I say to you, no matter what you have ever done, your future is a clean slate. It doesn't even have to be a promise. It is the most complete thing that makes the most perfect sense. Tomorrow is perfect, no matter what happened yesterday. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Sleep well. I love you dearly.